Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special episode of the Utah Story Show. We are reporting from our office in Holiday. We've been on lockdown for the last few weeks. I personally got sick. I had a cold, and I just told everybody to stay home. I stayed home. I recorded a little video last week, right after the earthquake, where I went into downtown Salt Lake City on my bike and did that from my kitchen, and it's been weird. It's just been a weird time. I had a cold, and of course I didn't want to risk infecting anybody. And I show no fever, no fatigue, no symptoms other than a head cold. So I'm about 90% sure I don't have coronavirus. I'd say 99% sure. But it's like, I'm probably like a lot of people. You just don't want to risk it. And so I've been playing it safe. And so this episode of the program, I want to go into questions that I've found that I believe the mainstream media is not asking, that they are neglecting. I think these are some important questions concerning the policy that we're moving forward with. In my 10 years of being an independent reporter, if you're new to this program, I'm the publisher of Utah Stories magazine. We're a print magazine in Utah. I just find there's quite a lot of questions the mainstream media doesn't ask, and if you can come up with the way to formulate questions, you can begin to come up with decent answers, and that's been a lot of the formula that we abide by here at Utah Stories, and that's what we try to provide answers to in this podcast. And so want to get into those three questions that I've come up with, and I want to get into a little bit more about what's happening specifically locally in Utah right now that I would suggest you keep your eye on. But first, I want to tell you about a couple advertisers. The Utah Stories Show is brought to you by Yoshi's and their new location in downtown Salt Lake City. Yoshi's has seriously awesome, fast, casual sushi. They've been legendary in the food truck scene and with their location in Murray for years. Now they have a location right in the heart of downtown. I highly recommend you go check them out. I know that they are reopening. If they haven't already reopened, they're reopening very soon for delivery and takeout. And they're just super awesome, great prices, and I love Yoshi's. And the Utah Story Show is also brought to you by Canyon Meadows grass-fed beef. If you have not tried pasture-raised beef, you need to check out Canyon Meadows. Their ranch is located in eastern Utah in beautiful Altamont. Visit cmrbeef.com to stock up on your ground beef, roasts, and steaks. Why wait in line in the supermarkets right now, folks, when you can get awesome grass-fed beef delivered to your door? You can stock up your freezer. I'd highly recommend you check them out. They're nutritionally dense meat because they pasture raise the animals on a pasture their entire lives, which makes them far healthier than grain-fed cows that you buy at the supermarket. I'm never going back to factory farm meat. I can't tell you about all the details, but I highly suggest you either check out the videos we did years ago at their ranch or go visit them right now at cmrbeef.com. And mention Utah Stories at your purchase. We're tracking this ad, and I feel confident that a lot of you will go out there and buy from them. It's good for the earth, it's good for you, and it's delicious flavor. All right, so to get into my questions, so this kind of started when the other day I was switching back and forth like I often do between Hannity and Rachel Maddow. You could not get any more different than the two news commentators. And what I found interesting, Sean Hannity was touting, of course, the amazing job Trump is doing, how there's a miracle cure right around the corner. We can rest assured we're all well taken care of, and we are about to get out of this. Just wait a few days, it seems like, according to Sean Hannity, and that miracle cure will start being distributed, and everything will be wonderful. And Rachel Maddow, on the other hand, she was saying that the giant Coast Guard hospital ships were never going to suffice the need for more hospital beds for New York City. New York City, the greatest city ever on the face of the earth, faces the most difficult challenge ever. And of course, the numbers of cases are skyrocketing. and it's looking very, very disastrous, and we could not have a worse person as a president at the helm of leadership. I like to go back and forth between the two of them because the truth lies somewhere in the murky middle. Obviously, that leaves a ton of gray area. But what I can understand is the biggest cities in America are indeed getting hit extremely hard. They're talking about using massive stadiums for hospital beds. FEMA is going to come in. They're going to set up the beds. They're going to try to export nurses out of retirement and bring them into the cities that need them most. And of course, we learned just today about the giant spending package that Congress is working to pass. It looked like a $2 trillion spending package. Now it's looking more like $4 trillion. And it looks like that will go through because Trump does have a high approval rating in his response to this virus as of today. It seems like that keeps going up and down. So what is the truth, though? And how do we wrap our heads around what is actually going on? Like I said, I believe that you start by asking questions. So let's ask some fundamental questions. And to preface, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in epidemiology. I'm not an expert in economics. But I think I do have a good ability to ask good questions. So here's my questions. There's 3 of them. This one concerns the death rate. Now, the death rate in healthy adults is far less than 1%. It's like 0.01%. If you are under the age of 40 and you are healthy, and there's basically no children dying of coronavirus, but if you are under the age of 40 and you're healthy, your chances of dying from coronavirus are about the same as dying from a really bad flu. So with that said, why are we taking such extreme measures, putting our whole economy at risk and our currency at risk for most Americans? By that, I mean, according to the BBC, and I'd like to link to this chart, if you contract the coronavirus and you are healthy, you statistically have almost a 0 chance of dying. That's according to the BBC. So if you are between 40 and 60, however, and you suffer from diabetes, lung problems, cardiovascular problems, you do risk death. You do risk death, and your risk of death, depending on the severity of your pre-existing illness, can go up to 10%. So you could have as high as 10% chance of dying. But that's only if you're unhealthy. So again, my first question is, when it's clear that healthy people will not die from this, why not put all our energy, effort, money into protecting the vulnerable? Why are we putting all this money, energy, and effort to protecting healthy Americans? And I can answer that question in the short term. I think it's good what we're doing now. It's good we're locking down. We don't want to see what happened in Italy, which is rapid spread of the disease to the unhealthy. Of course, we want to protect our vulnerable, our unhealthy, and our elderly Americans. So what we're doing now is fine, but longer term, this cannot continue. We cannot contain a virus like COVID when it's so clear that the symptoms never show up in a big percentage of the people who get it. There's just no chance we can contain it. So that's my question for the longer term. My second question concerning the economy is according to the Wall Street Journal, if we continue on the path we're on now, we could lose 24% of our total GDP output for the year 2020. That amounts to a massive amount of people unemployed and a massive amount of people at the lowest ends of the socioeconomic spectrum being severely impacted by this. So putting it in real terms, if you lived through the housing market collapse of 2008, you know what a terrible economy looks like. Now multiply that by at least 2 to see what we'd be heading for. Massive foreclosures on houses, cars being repossessed, homeless people everywhere, probably a resurgence in the opioid epidemic and drug abuse, resurgence in suicide rates. Crime would likely sound far more appealing to the lowest end of the socioeconomic ladder, extreme job scarcity, and our economy would be heading for disaster. That's basically the path we're heading on if we decide the best thing to do is mass quarantine for a long period of time. So my question is this: would it be really worth risking our entire economy, where we could jump into a 20% unemployment rate, to improve the odds of living for the most unhealthy, vulnerable Americans? Why not instead do everything we can, again, I'm asking this question, to protect our most vulnerable Americans? And the answer to that question is because we don't know who has it and who doesn't have it. There's simply a scarcity of tests right now. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. If there were the ability for every single American right now to get tested, then we know exactly who's got it, and we could contain the problem adequately. Not knowing is why we have to do what we do. But once there are enough tests, it seems to me that the best case, the best thing that we can do is protect our most vulnerable Americans and Utahns. So I want to give you an example. If you're healthy in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and you get coronavirus, and you have a 0.01% chance of dying, I think we can all handle that. And I think that would be far better to, understand that if healthy people get it, it could be very bad, but it would be far less bad than obliterating our economy and taking all the people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum and putting them out of a job. So it's a matter of looking at the worst of two evils, and I think the one evil is far worse than the other. So, for example, just a few years ago, I would have been at risk getting coronavirus. I had very bad asthma. I had really bad inflammation in my stomach every time I went running. My asthma was getting worse and worse, and I decided to really try to figure out what I could do to improve my health. And so I stopped eating gluten for the most part, and that actually is what made a huge difference in my own personal health. About 10% of Americans suffer from a susceptibility for gluten to cause inflammation, and that was definitely the case for me. When I cut out most of the gluten in my diet, I could start running longer distances again. I've always loved to run, but I was unable to when I had asthma, and my asthma actually went away. I think we as Utahns, as citizens, we all need to work towards taking greater charge of our own health and rather than expecting the government to step in and somehow take care of us. We need to figure out what's going on that we can do to boost our own immune systems. And that's really what we want to do with our April issue of Utah Stories, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about later in the program. And again, my question is, my final question, part 2B, I guess you'd say, is if, say, 80 to 90% of the population were to get coronavirus, the healthy Americans, and then we just go through the course of having it, then we don't have it anymore, and we're not contagious anymore. What about getting a special wristband for those people who've had it, who can then care to the needs of the more vulnerable Americans, the elderly, the ones who are more prone to suffer and die if they were to get it? If there could be a whole huge percentage of the population who would be fine to attend to the needs of those people once they've gone through the course of having the disease and getting over it. And that just seems like a far better outcome than putting everybody in quarantine for a long period of time. This is why I asked those two questions. This is question 3. What do you suppose is going to happen if the federal government spends $4 trillion on an aid package, and then, as Congress just passed today, basically takes the cap off the bottle and creates an unlimited amount of spending that they want to provide to basically help everybody because they've shut down the economy? So say $4 trillion, then they need another $4 trillion and another $4 trillion on top of that. What do you suppose is going to happen? Well, first of all, let's ask the question, where do we come up with $4 trillion in the first place? So what the federal government does is they issue government bonds and they try to sell those bonds, and they'll raise the price, the interest rate on the bonds they're willing to pay out for people to buy them, as they have a greater need to sell more and more of them. So the last I checked, it's about 4 something percent you can earn on your money if you go out and buy 10 or 20 year treasury bonds. But eventually people aren't going to want to buy those bonds anymore, and the Fed's going to have to continue to increase the interest rate to sell those bonds. And what is the net impact of that? The net impact of basically printing more money is always inflation. The money you have in your bank becomes worth less and less and less when you want to buy a house, when you want to buy a car, when you want to buy a washing machine, because what happens is we lose our faith and confidence in our own currency. So to think that the federal government is so incredibly generous because they're willing to give you a check for $1,000 and then maybe another $1,000, then another $1,000, that's not generosity. That in effect is taking any money you have stored away and devaluing it. So your 401k, you may feel good about the value it's at now. Imagine if you could buy half as many products with that 401k after we're done with this. So where I really especially notice inflation is in the housing market. I think we like to think that we're really special because our housing market's so hot and so everything is really expensive now. That's inflation, folks. Go to any single good economy in the entire country, and their housing prices have gone out of control. That's inflation. Look at these like $50,000 trucks. How you got to spend, you want a nice big SUV, you got to spend $30,000. Look at how things were just 5 years ago. So we don't see inflation happening at the level of our foods because our food is subsidized by the government. Our government has this farm bill, and they give farmers massive amounts of money. That keeps the prices of food low. But where you do see inflation is when you buy things that require you to live: housing, cars, transportation, bigger ticket items. And so that the government is going to spend 4, 8, or even 12 trillion to help you, they aren't actually helping you. They're giving away a huge chunk of the value of our currency to try to stick holes in a sinking ship. And I don't think this ship needs to sink at all if they pass the right policies. And so what is the answer, really? I mean, what is the answer? I criticize the policies that are out there. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not even going to pretend that I have all the answers. I'm basically a hack. I've been a hack journalist. I really didn't take a lot of journalism classes. I studied documentary film and journalism. But the greatest answer to every problem our country has ever faced has been to unleash the power of the free market and the power of the goodness and generosity of all Americans that they have towards their neighbors, their family, and their community. That's what I believe in. The government in America has never been the answer to our prayers. It's always been our friends, family, and community. We need that to come first. We need to realize that it's our neighbors who we should be helping and looking out for. We should protect our elderly. We should protect the sick and the vulnerable and the weak. And we do not need the federal government to protect us. And we shouldn't be calling for that. We shouldn't be cheering now about $1,000 checks. That is not the answer. And, the restaurant shutdown, for example, these are people I've been doing business with for the last 10 years because about 60% of our advertisers are these awesome, ma and pa local restaurants. And they being shut down for 2 weeks is such an extreme blow. And it's so incredibly difficult for a lot of them to function right now. So I'm highly encouraging, if you're watching this program, go out and support these awesome restaurants who help make Utah Stories possible, because they, I believe, are the social fabric of our communities. You take away the bars and the restaurants, and you basically don't have communities anymore. You have places that nobody wants to go to. It's our restaurants and our bars that are going to be suffering for the next little while. And if you can find out if they're going to be doing takeout, we're going to be providing a link to a list where you can find those things out. We're going to be creating our own list as well. Visit utahstories.com for more on that. And finally, I just think that we here in Utah, we've always had this really awesome pioneer spirit. We've always had this spirit of preparing for disaster. I think we will be unusually prepared for this if it drags on to 2, 3, 4 months. I highly recommend people grow a garden. If supply chains do end up getting interrupted, which some of them obviously are, but if supply chains for food, I don't really anticipate that happening. But if they do perhaps get interrupted, one of the best things you could do right now, it's early March, is start preparing to plant a productive garden. I mean, think about what you would want to have in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables, and start planting those in your garden. And so as I said, I went to downtown Salt Lake City after the earthquake, and I drove around on my bike and I started interviewing people. And what I found was nobody was hanging their head low. Nobody was thinking the world was going to end. That was basically my question: is the world coming to an end? We had a 5.7 earthquake here in Utah, the biggest one I felt by far. Just my house was just bouncing up and down, and it was crazy to experience that. But nobody was pessimistic. These business owners that I talked to, they were all just like, this is crazy what we're going through right now. I wonder what's going to happen next, but we'll get over this. Everything's going to work out. And to all these people who are panicking, I mean, there was a mini riot going on at Costco that my friend told me about. They were fighting over meat. And so Costco has very strict rules. We have the biggest Costco in the world in Salt Lake City, where you can only buy one package of any one kind of meat. And that is definitely contrary to the Utah pioneer spirit, to go and hoard and take all the toilet paper and basically take everything you possibly can for yourself. Realize that there's a certain amount of everything that comes in every single day off a truck, and you don't need to go out and try to capture it all for yourself so you can stockpile your giant security bunker that you built 10 years ago because you're such an awesome prepper. I just think that is not the spirit that's going to get us through this, and I think it's probably a good idea if you get a few extra items for your pantry, as we did. But we can get through this together. And so with that said, that concludes this episode of the Utah Story Show. We had guests line up this week. We were planning on having guests, but I just thought with the uncertainty of myself and my cold that I've been getting over, and with everything else, let's just put a pause on the guests, and we'll return to all of these awesome guests we've got lined up in the next couple of weeks. So I hope you subscribe to the program, and if you can also do me a special favor, I'd appreciate if you would let any of our podcast advertisers just let them know that you found out about them here. We're still kind of getting this podcast off the ground. Our main source of revenue is the magazine. The magazine, our April issue, I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. It is a little bit uncertain if we will be able to publish it. We're just letting any advertiser who wants to drop out. I mean, obviously we have contracts with these people, but I want them to not have to feel like they're obligated to pay their advertising bill before they pay their employees. And so we've had a bunch of advertisers who are dropping out of our April issue. It's actually, we planned it months ago. It's our health and wellness issue. We have a whole bunch of doctors who are writing articles for it. We're writing articles about the importance of planting a garden, how to plant a garden, what you can do that's valuable and meaningful for your family to prepare for the next coming months, where you might have fewer resources to keep everything afloat. So it's a little bit tenuous right now if we're going to have an April issue. But I wanted to say this: if you would like us to have an April issue, if you value Utah Stories magazine, I leave it up to you. Share this program with 3 or 4 people. If you can contribute anywhere from $1 to $5, even $1 would be just sort of a token offering to show that you do want us to come out with the issue that you would value that the magazine continues. That would be very meaningful to me, and that would definitely improve the chances of us coming out with the magazine. But it would really depend on this video, this message kind of going viral. So you'd have to share this with 3 or 4 of your friends. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We'll share content online. I'll still produce this podcast, and we'll just let you guys determine if that actually is going to happen or not. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you who are watching. I love getting the comments on your appreciation of the guests we've had on the program and your appreciation of the magazine. It means a ton to me. It's been a really kind of tough first quarter. It's just been so weird. So much uncertainty. This was one of our biggest, best issues we produced, just in March, and we really were seeing all this momentum. And then we just sort of saw the bottom fall out of everything. Most of Moab's going to be shut down. We had plans to do a big Moab section for the next 6 months. We'll continue with a smaller Moab section, but we're just letting advertisers go out. And so that's kind of where we're at with the business side of things. But I'm optimistic about it, and we're going to be fine. We're strong here at Utah Stories. We started during the Great Recession, and we started by writing about how people stay happy, healthy, and productive in tough times. That's how Utah Stories got started in 2009. And so I feel good about it. And so with that, I'd like to thank a couple more advertisers. Sherry Griffith River Expeditions is in Moab, and I went on their Yampa trip, and they've got some truly incredible guides and guests, and one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had on a river was indeed with Sherry Griffith. They're just incredible. The attention to detail they pay to the food, to the experience that everybody has, the safety. I'd highly recommend you go out, make your whole summer a better experience by booking your trip on the Yampa River, the Labyrinth, Cataract, or Desolation Canyon. Go visit them right now and book your summer trip at www.griffithexp.com. That's GriffithExp.com. Or type in Sherry Griffith River Expeditions into Google and you'll find them that way. The Utah Stories Show is also brought to you by The Carpet Barn. The Carpet Barn is located in South Salt Lake. They've been in the carpet business for over 40 years. Their staff is friendly and helpful, and they have a huge selection of carpet, which, if you're looking to save money, is truly awesome for the price. And I can personally tell you that. I just carpeted my entire basement with one of their higher-end carpets. It was $9 per yard, and it was so far superior to the previous carpet that I paid $12 a yard for. It was crazy. It was high thread count. It's thick, plush. The pad, it was super thick. It feels great. So for all your carpeting needs, visit the Carpet Barn in South Salt Lake and mention you learned about them from Utah Stories. All right. Again, thanks everybody for watching. This concludes this episode of Utah Stories program. I'll see you next time.